Before the start, I just want to say thank you for the Christmas card of the landlord. No, we haven't seen you since before Christmas, so I just want to say thanks for the Christmas card. Right, I start. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Doherty, Mullen and Lloyd.
Thank you. Number 2, are there any declarations of interest? Number 3, public participation. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, public participation will be dealt with via the submission of comments or questions to the Council prior to the meeting commencing. Anyone wishing to submit a comment or a question to the Council must do so by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 2nd of March, 2021.
None has been received, Chair.
Thank you. To confirm the minutes of the last meeting, members are asked to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2021, pages 1 to 4.
Everybody's on silent. Would somebody like to confirm the minutes?
Confirmed.
Lovely, thank you.
Item number 5, planning applications, land east of McGull, planning hearing update.
Thank you, Chair. By now, all of you will have seen that the appeal has been decided and the appeal was allowed on the land east of McGull. I did send round the decision notice, Mr. Clegg, all 34 pages of it. There is also a raft of conditions that go with it, which I think strengthened our position, shall we say, that we took regarding the flood relief channel and the construction environment management plan. That worked out very well for us. I think it's a huge thing that we were able to secure that HGVs, and in fact any construction traffic, had to approach the site through the eastern side of the site rather than coming through the western part of the town. If you have a look at the site, practically everything in McGull is to the western part of the site. So that was a fantastic success for us. If you have any questions about it, I have to say that Edward and Philippa are here and may be able to explain things slightly better than I could. Having read it, there's an element of it. Once again, it's somewhat dry prose, but if you have got any questions, I'm sure Edward and Philippa would be happy to answer them. But it's done, it's dusted. We now need to monitor those conditions to make sure that they are adhered to.
Councillor Frank Sharp.
So I couldn't unmute myself there. I just wondered if there was an indication as to when the developers may start work and the length of time potentially it might take. Was there any indication?
And Councillor, no, there isn't an indication. And of course, what has to happen next, as Angela mentioned, the applicant now has to discharge quite a lot of conditions. There are a lot of pre-commencement conditions, so they've got to go through that process first before they can do anything, and that includes the demolition works. So the first, in order to start, they've got to start discharging conditions, and that takes 8 weeks. And what they will probably do is that they'll probably tackle a number of the conditions at one shot. So instead of making multiple applications, there'll be one application that will seek to address maybe 10 or 15 of the conditions. And some of them relate to demolition, some to drainage, the design of the flood relief channel, there's ecological conditions. So I think they'll try and pick those off in one go. So they'll have to get a package of information together, put that to the council. A lot of the conditions are pre-commencement. so they can't start until those conditions are discharged. So it's not possible to know when when development will start. But as Angela said, monitoring the conditions is quite important. And perhaps a point that's worth mentioning is that discharge of conditions are not normally, there's no consultation, prior consultation on them. So it's a question of keeping a watching brief when those applications come in, because there's no requirement to consult third parties. And it's something you may need to alert, I think, Diane Humphreys, who's the case officer at the council, saying you have an interest, can she let you know when the applicant makes an application for discharge? That's what I would suggest. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thanks again.
Pleasure.
Councillor Chris Carlson.
First of all, just thanks to everyone for all the hard work and getting these conditions put in. As other councillors have said, I think that was a David and Goliath victory for us. So well done to everyone. I took a walk up to Poverty Lane on Saturday, and after some comments on Facebook where that work had already commenced, and there is some Harris fencing up there, and it looks like access from Poverty Lane has already been made. Is anyone else seeing that?
We contacted the planning department regarding this. As we understand it, they are removing hedgerows, which is not technically commencement of development according to legal services at Sefton. Having mentioned that, I phoned them, I want to say, was it last week, John, that we spoke about this, or was it Monday? You're on mute.
Councillor says you're on mute.
Yeah.
No, it was last week.
It was last week.
Yeah.
So I phoned planning to speak to the enforcement officer to say that they needed to get out there to have a look at this. And I know Councillor Say has emailed. I haven't had a response from planning as of yet.
I have. I mean, basically what they said was, I got one off Derek McKenzie, and then I asked to see the legal advice, and the legal officer contacted me, sent me an email. And basically what they were saying was they were allowing them to remove the trees and the shrubs because obviously the nesting season was starting. So, and they didn't consider that to be a pre-commencement of development. However, some of the guys apparently told some of the residents we're going to put the roundabout in by March. Now, Stephen Whiteside from Highways tells me they know nothing about that and he doesn't think that's likely to happen. So I've told the residents it's unlikely to happen, but to let us know if anything more substantial than hedge trimmers. They did have 3 JCBs on site, and Derek McKenzie contacted them over that, and they admitted they did have 3 JCBs. It was all behind fencing and putting fencing up, but all they've asked to do and has been accepted is removing the hedgerows and the trees because of the bird nesting season, which obviously begins on 1st of March. So it was done very quickly last week.
I personally just think we should be making this as awkward as possible. We should object to that because that would have had to go under an ecological impact.
Well, I objected to it, and that's the reason I contacted Derek McKenzie, and I sent it through to him and enforcement, seeking to get a stop notice, because obviously I'd experienced this before at Turnbridge, where they turned up on the first day and with all the diggers, etc., and didn't have a SEMP in place. So they got stopped straight away. But basically this time, as I say, is it Kinnear, the legal officer, the solicitor, the planning lawyer?
Neil Kennett?
No, it's like Kinnear or something. I think his name is Neil, but it's a name like that. Anyway, I've got an email off him, basically telling me there's nothing we could do, that it wasn't pre-commencement of the development. I mean, I did intend to make it as awkward as we could for them, you know, because obviously we want a whole road out of them.
Thank you, John.
Has Josh disappeared? Where's he gone? Oh, there he's.
I'm here still.
Oh, sorry.
I was just waiting to see if anyone else was going to ask any other questions.
Councillor Sharp's indicated.
Right, Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, sorry about the mute again. Again, I know this is the $101 question. Really, it's regarding the haulage road. I know that in the inquiry that we're talking about the possibility of extending the road that's going to go to the reservoir on towards the site as a possibility. And there was a concern in the inquiry that they needed to discuss this with the landowner further. It was the same landowner as the one that was going to give permission for the haulage road to the reservoir. It made perfect sense, of course, to everyone, presumably, other than Persimmon at the time, that road should take place or should be created. Is there no such requirements for them to undertake that short extra piece of road? And how likely might it be?
I think the main bit of ground that was made in terms of the condition is that the inspector has specified that construction traffic, and that's all construction traffic, HGVs and smaller vans, cannot go west through McGull. So what was actually discussed at the inquiry was that the routes that were possible were for either for them to go through the site through the northern part or to go east out that way. And I think where the appellant came unstuck is that they were unable to state which was better, or which they said that both were possible, both were feasible. And I think that's why in the end the inspector has said, well, do what you want, but don't go west. So we don't know at the moment whether they're going to reach an agreement with the other landowners or whether they will go east. But the good thing is, the positive thing for you is that they're not to go through your residential area of McGull.
And I think, Councillor Sharp, in order to build they have to build the flood relief channel before any houses are occupied. So from the north side, they have to build a haul road to the Winnie Brook in order to construct the flood relief channel. Similarly, in order to construct the flood relief channel from the south side, they have to build a haul road. So the obvious thing is, well, why can't you cross it and that be the haul road through the site? But that's the part they haven't agreed on. But they will have to build two roads that provide for that construction works to take place. And I think what happened at the inquiry, if I'm not incorrect, was they showed a haul road, but it wasn't the same as the spine road.
Yeah,
it was different. So it came through from School Lane, but it wasn't in the position of the spine road. But it's
No, it was closer to Swift's farm, I think it was. Yeah.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you.
Okay.
So I presume that's that different road as opposed to the spine road is to maintain it on the land that's already been agreed.
Well, I don't know if they've agreed.
No.
We don't know what they've agreed with the landowners on the north side. Obviously they've got control, or will have control on the south side from Poverty Lane, because they've got a detailed application and they'll have an option, or they've already purchased already. I don't know which it is. But on the north side, there wasn't any evidence that they had an agreement with the owners on the north.
Yeah.
So they are dependent on their goodwill, and it's still something they presumably have to negotiate, I think.
Well, thank you very much again.
That helps.
Councillor Patrick McKinley.
Thanks, Chair. One thing we need to decide now as a council is whether we want to open up dialogue with the developers now. We've got to a situation where I suppose the first stages of the kind of war, if you like, is over. And now what we need to do is sit down, or do we sit down with them and see how we can take this forward by more regular communication with the developers, so they're not going off and doing what they want without any kind of reference to ourselves as a council. They have been very disrespectful towards the town council in so many ways. But I think and I speak as someone who's been engaged in this conflict, if you like, for a long time. But I'm prepared to put all that behind me now. Say, okay, let's sit down with them. Let's see what the best deal we can get for the people of Maghull. We've got what we wanted in terms of the traffic, great victory, and the flood relief channel. But as a council, we need to take the guidance of the many, because it's a democracy, to say, okay, are we now ready to open up a dialogue with the developers and try and get them around the table on a more regular basis, so we can kind of keep an eye on the development as it goes forward, particularly in light that the north side, the Swift application and consequent 106 agreements, we understand haven't been signed yet. So we need to be in there making sure that we get our interest in terms of 106 money is registered what we want it for. And that is one of the things we're very keen on, is the building communities and not just building housing estates. And within our neighbourhood plan, we've got a policy that relates to looking at some kind of community hub. So this is something I think we should try and push for now for the north side of the development. But it means us sitting down with the developers and trying to get a bit closer to them. So it will be the council's decision at the end of the day. As a ward councillor for Sedell, I am willing to talk to the developers now, if they'll speak to us.
Thank you, councillor.
If nobody else has a question, I'd just like to tell you what I've done in between times.
Councillor, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Tony Carr was indicating to speak.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I fully agree with Patrick. Part of it, well, this is going to have a massive impact on my ward coming through as well. I think not to engage with the developers would be doing our residents a disservice. I think we've got no alternative. We must engage with them in order to not only to keep an eye on what they're doing anyway, but to achieve the best for our residents and future residents on this site when it's developed. So I fully agree with Patrick on that. Thank you.
Was Councillor Sayers indicating then?
Yeah, it was just me. Thanks, Josh. Basically, it's just to say that, yeah, I'd agree talking as well as a Sedell councillor.
Councillor Desmond?
Yeah, it's just to say that I think it was other councils, what they did at one point. I think it was Persimmon, but I know it was one of the developers anyway. And I spoke to Angela about this at the time. I spoke to John. They have actually approached us in the past, some councils in the past anyway, me being one of them. But I referred it on to other people.
Councillor Chris Carlson and then Councillor Ross Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Although it hurts me to say it, I do agree with Pat and Tony and the other guys. We do need to be speaking to these people. But I would remind everybody, it's not just the developers, it's Sefton Council officers and their planning department who are bending over backwards to put this development in place. So we need to keep a close eye on them as well. I'm not happy with them giving them permission to take trees out without an ecological impact assessment. For all we know, there was birds and whatever nesting in there anyway. I don't think that should have been done. I think that should be regarded as a breach. But that's just my personal opinion. But you know what? There's people who are in this meeting now who've sat down with these developers and offered their hands of friendship and assistance and so on and so forth if they build that whole road, which was the only common sense way to go about this development. And they point blank refused. And then with all of their intimidation tactics and the bloody lawyers and everything, you know what I mean? You just got to remember who you're dealing with here. They're lower than a snake's belly, some of these developers. So I just wanted to put that on record there. It's not just the developers, it's Sefton Council we need to be keeping an eye on as well.
Councillor Ross Ferguson.
Yeah, I agree again with Councillor Carlson and Councillor McKinley. We do need to speak to these people, but bear in mind some of the things that they've done on the Poppy Fields estate and some of the sort of skirting around their responsibilities. I think it's vitally important we know what they're up to all the time.
Thank you. Is there not a law about, like what Councillor Carson was talking about with the trees? Isn't there a law about not allowed to take bushes or trees out certain times of year, or is it legal?
Yeah, it started the 1st of March. You're not supposed to do any works between the 1st of March and something like the 31st of August. All right. I think September is the time, because we tend to avoid hedge work because we always get criticised for it.
I know we've had problems in the school.
Yeah. We always get criticised for it. You're supposed to examine it and everything and be able to confidently say that there are no nests in it. However, I sort of agree with Councillor Carlson. You know, if somebody said, were there any nests in there? The answer will come back no. So it's a little bit of a pointless question if they were told to go in there and remove them because they want to get this work done. The issue that you've got, I think, is the swiftness with which they have moved onto the site would lead you to believe that they're not planning on uprooting those hedges and trees and then going, do you know what, we're going to now wait the 8 weeks, because you might as well wait until September to take out the hedges. That's the issue. That I think that's the natural suspicion that you would have, that, you know, something else is going to happen on site once they've been removed and they haven't completed the requirements of the pre-commencement conditions.
Cheers. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thanks. I was talking to one of the planners, and basically they said that there is a process where developers do meet with councils and other interested parties on a sort of regular basis going on, and whether, you know, they try and broker that if that's what we wanted to do. As an aside, he said that currently the developers see the town council as an obstacle. So I was a bit taken aback by that, and basically I said to him, well, you know, we're only an obstacle if they're not fulfilling their obligations, and that's all we've ever asked for. And I said, well, the inspector recognised that at the inquiry. We always started off saying we wouldn't oppose the development per se, but what we wanted was a sustainable addition to the town, not sort of a hit and run housing estate. So I said to them, well, when you go back to them, I said, you know, obviously the council decide whether they want to speak to them, but in respect of obstacle, if they think they're going to just try and ride roughshod, we will be an obstacle. But that's, you know, we're upholding our legal rights, that's all. We're not trying to be awkward for being awkward's sake. So it does show you the sort of frame of mind that they have. But I do agree with Patrick and Yvonne and Chris, you know, and Tony, we do need to organise and try and sit down with them, and we'll see how we go. Because the other thing is, my experience at Turnbridge is, even if you've got the SEMP in place, it's really difficult to police and enforce. At Turnbridge, they were saying things like, well, they had rogue lorry drivers turning up, and there might have been a grain of truth. Apparently, there was almost fisticuffs on site where the site manager was barricading the site, not letting them off. A lot of these guys are on piecework, and they just want to get in and out, and they don't care what damage they do. So it's going to be a tough haul, that, and we need to be able to make sure that they've got contractual things in place where they can dismiss companies that don't comply with the SEMP in due course.
Thank you, Councillor.
The additional piece of information I was going to give is that when I spoke to Edward regarding the decision notice that came through, he advised that we write to Diane Humphreys, who is dealing with the resubmission planning application for the site. If you recall, Persimmon Countrywide put in the appeal and put in a resubmission to ask that to submit further comments that would say we require the same conditions to be put on the resubmission application as the inspector has insisted on the appeal decision. So there's no way of cherry picking which application you want to follow, which may or may not have kinder conditions or more easier conditions to discharge. So, and that's been sent. So anything else on that particular, the planning hearing update?
Land East of Muggle.
Land East of Muggle, good old Land East of Muggle, yeah. Where would we be without it? Then we move on to the next thing that's coming up on the horizon.
Just one more thing. Can I make a suggestion there that we contact the developers and invite them to come along and speak to us, and also, if possible, some of Sefton Council's planning department, so that we have got a sustainable development up there, and we are actually proactively engaging them in communications. We don't, you know, they're going to build these houses, but we need to make sure they build them right and with minimal impact to the residents in the goal.
Do you want that to be at a future council meeting, Councillor Carlson?
I can't make the meetings during the day, so it'd have to be an evening meeting, you know what I mean? If I'm involved in a group that meets with them. But yeah, absolutely. I'd like that as a group for us to agree that and to start making that happen.
Okay. Is that seconded? Right.
No. Thank you.
All those in favour?
All those in favour?
Yeah, I think that's unanimous. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen Yvonne's hand there at the back. Yeah.
Right. Land to the south of Days Lane, we're going.
Okay, we asked the landlords to have a look at that for us and to examine the planning application. Philippa's letter to us that we can forward if we are agreed is attached to your agenda, and obviously she is here to answer any questions that you may have.
You want me to explain anything first?
Right, Councillor Patrick McKinley.
Thanks. Thanks to Philippa and Edward for the detailed kind of scrutiny of this application. We kind of felt it was wrong because I'm sure everybody knows where this particular piece of land is. It's off Days Lane, and it's in between the one housing estate and a newer housing estate. Days Lane being opposite it. The entranceway to it is very narrow and so on and so forth. But what Philip has done is, I think, really, I mean, very impressive in terms of there are things in here I had no idea about. So I'd just like to thank you for that, Philippa. Prior to Philippa doing this, I've called this in anyway, because I've got residents on my case over the potential for traffic causing chaos on the road. It's hell there of a morning. As some of you will know, you can't get emergency vehicles down. The buses can't get down. People double park. It's catastrophic. But one thing I wanted to ask, and it was really interesting when I read this, the designation of the land in the old, prior to the adoption of the local plan, has it classed as green space. And although it's now classed as education and care within the remit of the local plan, does the definition of green space still apply to it?
To an extent, but not really.
No.
I'll explain. So basically, the previous designation, which said it was green space, meant that if you were a care or education institution that was coloured in green on the map, if you like, you couldn't extend or expand or do anything because the green space rules said that you protect the green space. So this is why they've changed it. They changed it to allow existing facilities in use to grow within their sites. But if any sites had become defunct, that they could be redeveloped for something else. So then in the new policy, it's got two directions to it. One is for sites that are in use. So that includes this site on Days Lane, because there's James Page on it, which is occupied. There's another care home on it, which I don't know how you pronounce, but that's currently empty. But the site as a whole is one, and it remains in use. So this site falls into one that is in active use as a school, college or care institution. So the types of development that they are allowed to do in accordance with the policy is anything to do with the existing use, which would enhance its viability. So, extend it, provide more rooms, that sort of thing. Or they can do community-based recreational sports facilities ancillary to the existing use. That seems a little bit unlikely for a care home. That sounds a bit more like a school case. Imagine school playing fields and they build a centre, and then we've got kids at the weekend playing football as well. That seems like that sort of thing. I don't know what sports you can do ancillary to a care home. Yeah. But apart from that, you're allowed to do environmental improvements, which would enhance the site's environmental quality. So that's not really anything that's going to get you any money as a developer. That's maybe, putting ponds and habitats and maybe paths for the public through, something like that. So I honestly don't see why anyone who has a site in use as a school, college or care institution is going to enhance the environmental quality, because I don't see what's in it for them. So the question that you've actually asked me is, does the green space designation still carry some weight? Well, it does to an extent, because there's the part 2 for sites in active use is that key green infrastructure must be maintained or retained, not maintained, retained. So I guess that means in the case of this site, I said that about a third of it was covered in buildings and hard standing and the rest of it is open. So I don't think that means that they can't build on any of the part that's open, but I guess they need to obviously look after Winnie Brook. They shouldn't be taking out hedges and trees. I would interpret it to mean that. But however, it is in active use, therefore the policy doesn't allow it to be redeveloped for any other purpose. So I'll just explain. The other part of the policy is for sites that used to be in use as schools, colleges or care institutions. So, a vacant care home or a school that's closed, that's what we're talking about. And for that part, it says that you can redevelop for a use which is compatible with the surroundings, provided that any open space is surplus to recreational requirements. And again, that doesn't sound like the sort of thing that applies to a care home. That sounds more like we're talking about sports pitches at schools. So it is a bit of a strange policy. You've got to wonder what they were thinking when they wrote it. But I think the point is that the policy doesn't allow a site that is in active use to be discarded for that purpose and redeveloped for something else entirely, such as red row houses. So basically, as we see it, the application that has come in is simply in conflict with the policy that they have recently written, recently adopted, and it shouldn't be allowed.
But just mention.
There is one thing that we wrote in the letter, which we were just discussing between ourselves before we came on the call, is so we say it's in conflict with the policy, and it is, but the council may decide that it's going to approve it anyway as a departure from the local plan. And they are allowed to do that. And if they do, they must refer it to the Secretary of State to ask him if it's okay. And he has 21 days to react if it isn't. And probably 99 times out of, or even, well, they never do anything. They just think it's part of the democratic process. And if a council wants to abandon their plans and meet a local need, then so be it. So that's, I suppose, the caveat to what we're saying. It is against the plan, but that doesn't mean it's impossible for them to decide that it is absolutely the right thing that they want to do.
So one thing, sorry, can I just come back?
Of course, yeah.
one thing which I think the planning officers will come back with is that there's a need for retirement accommodation in McGull, and it stipulates that, you know, that there's a greater need for. But as you quite rightly say in your analysis, they already have sites allocated within the local plan to accommodate the need for older people's residents and so on. So that's the hurdle we're going to have to overcome, because I was told, the planning officers told me, oh no, we can just use this as a windfall site to help us kind of meet the housing requirement for older folk. Now, what you've said is there's a question mark over that, whether they can or can't do that. But knowing Sefton, that's what they will try and do. And it's how we can develop a defence to that. One thing I am very, very conscious of, within the local plan, McGull, without all these windfall sites, is taking 25% of the housing needs within Sefton's local plan, whereas McGull's housing need is 12%. So already we're taking over twice the amount of housing development than we actually need in this town. So therefore, you know, we're saying, okay, you know, bring all your grace unwashed, so to speak, and we will accommodate them, that kind of stuff. But with all these additional sites, we're taking more and more and more of Sefton's kind of needs within the local plan, housing needs. There must be some kind of ceiling. Even it becomes a moral question almost, that, you know, planning law stipulates this, but surely to God, there's got to be somewhere that says enough is enough. Because if they fill that particular green space in, that will just contribute to urban sprawl all the way along, you know, Days Lane. I'm no NIMBY, but, you know, you look at the sites we've got now, Turnbridge, the other one, Liverpool Road South, the one we're going to look at next in Liverpool Road North. We've got Poppy Fields, we've got lands east of McGull, we've got the new semi, secure units, so on and so forth. The town actually feels as if it's under siege at the moment in terms of development. And I just hope we can do something to stop this. Yeah.
Well, I understand what you're saying and what you mean. I suppose if you were going to be a real sort of planning purist about it, if this was a site that was actually defunct as a care home, if it was all empty, you know, falling into dereliction, then arguably we might be thinking that actually this could be a good place to put houses because it's previously developed, it's within the urban area, and it's different to going into, you know, farmers' fields that have never had anything on them.
Mm.
So I suppose there's that way of looking at it. But the fact is that's not how it's got its write-up in the plan. It's got its write-up as a care home that should stay as a care home because we've got an aging population and we need specialist housing, not just for older people, but for people with other complex needs. So the fact is this site is in use, it's being used. If it needs to enhance its viability, they can look at extending it because the policy allows it. But they don't need to sort of shut up shop and sell it to Redrow for houses because the policy doesn't say that they can do that. It's not allocated in the plan as a residential area. It's not allocated for residential development. The purpose of this site in the plan is to be a care home and to have some space around it. Yeah. So I think, you know, there is a strong argument. And if you wanted to sort of take it further, if you wanted us to, we could add a little bit more. And this is quite a significant development. It's 78 dwellings altogether. I mean, if you grant planning permission and this gets built out, potentially that's one of their allocated sites to a similar amount of housing that might never come off the ground and fail. You know, somewhere where they wanted housing, maybe somewhere a little bit more urban and gritty that no one will want to take because they've had this nice slice of the cake, you know. So we could add a little bit more, you know, ratchet it up a bit if you want us to.
Yeah, I think so.
Can I just come in and clarify a few things? The issue with it being the Park Haven Trust is that they are planning on selling that land to Redrow, so that they can build another vascular dementia unit similar to the one that the Dover Meadows site paid for, but on their Park Havens Trust site on Liverpool Road South. That is the plan, because they have a lot of space there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they were prepared to. Redrow certainly wanted more land. This is more for councillors, really. I appreciate that Edward and Philippa might not know exactly what I'm talking about. But the cricket pitch, for example, at Park Haven was a place where Redrow did want to go and develop and sort of develop Dover Meadows out towards Jubilee Woods, whereupon this site seems to have fallen of, well, the houses that the care homes that are there, Kiffen Taylor House is unsuitable completely for the amount of the type of care they want to offer. And James, is it James Taylor? I always get that wrong. James Page.
James Page, yeah.
James Page, not James Taylor, the musician. But James Page House is still occupied, but it is to, the hope would be to move those people round. And that is what they've explained to us when they've had us in. They've done it correctly. They've had us in to explain that. But again, it doesn't really fit in with the policy. And there is, I suppose, the argument to Sefton that if this doesn't come on board, Park Haven Trust don't have the money to build the advanced vascular dementia unit that they want to build on their main site.
Well, as you mentioned that, Angela, there are a couple of documents that they referred to in a covering letter, Redrow, that is, sorry. There's a planning statement that they've done and a viability assessment that they said was supporting the application, but they're nowhere to be seen. So I have mentioned that in the letter, like, apparently these documents have been produced. We want to see them. I wasn't sure what the viability assessment was, what angle they were going for. My first thought that it was to say that the care homes on site weren't viable. But again, the policy doesn't have any viability aspect to it apart from you can extend to enhance your viability. It doesn't say you can demonstrate you're not viable and off you go. It's just not what it says. So the other thing that is an issue to do with viability is that they are supposed to be providing 30% affordable housing, but they're offering 20.5%. And I assume there's some sort of justification for that in the viability assessment, but I haven't seen it because it's not there.
Right. Okay.
Can we ask that, Angela?
Sorry.
Can we ask Sefton for those documents?
Yeah.
Philip has requested, please.
Yeah. The planning statement and the viability assessment.
Yeah, we actually put it in our letter towards the end, Angela. So
yeah, it is. I've read it. It is. It's in there. Yeah.
If the letter goes in, then therein goes the request.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just say I'm struggling to hear Paul, Philippa, sorry.
Sorry, I'll come nearer.
Okay, Chair, can I just mention that it's Councillor Tom Hughes, then Councillor Sharp, then Councillor Ross Ferguson on the list to speak?
Oh, I had it as Councillor Sharp, Tom Hughes, and then Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, right then. Well, I'm sure Councillor Hughes and Councillor Sharp would be prepared to fight it out about who goes first.
Yeah, that's fine. Saying Josh.
Pardon? Councillor Frank Sharp.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, thank you very much again, Philippa, for the fantastic report. Secondly, I'd like to echo exactly what Patrick said. He's sort of summed up what I was going to say in the main, which was one about the accessibility, that it's going to be a very crowded road. It's impossible to move already. And secondly, I very much like your last sentence on the first paragraph, which I think you've answered as well, which are just, this cannot be justified and the local plan is recently adopted and there's no pressing need to deliver housing whilst sites allocated for residential development are yet to be delivered. But there's a bit of a caveat there, you feel, that they could still deliver on that. And again, to echo what Patrick was saying, was the population. I went around all the new developments in Maghull about half a year ago or so, and counted all the houses that were flats that were being built, and I perhaps exaggerated it by timesing it by 4 residents per house, and it was a population increase of about between 1/5 and 1/4 eventually with all the new houses, and we still haven't got the infrastructure in place, you know. So, but the one thing I won't be repeating from other people is that I just wondered, Philippa, when you looked at the plan, which is, it's about that, is it a culvert at the back there that's is going into Winnie Brook? And of course, Winnie Brook has become the sort of superhighway of the drainage of the whole of Maghull, seemingly. And this is going to obviously increase it dramatically, I would have thought. And I just wonder if you'd looked at the impact of that, particularly in light of the fact that we had a very close miss with the flooding in Maghull. We were sort of knocking on doors, attempting to evacuate houses at one stage. And so we do have huge problems that need to be taken very seriously. And I think this may further impact upon it.
Yeah, well, obviously, we are not flood risk experts. I looked at this a few weeks ago, and I took the view that with flood risk and surface water, it's a technical issue, and as such, there will be a technical solution to it. So I took a brief read of the documents that were submitted. There's going to be what they call an attenuation pond, which is a pond that will store flood water and be discharged into Winnie Brook at a rate which it can cope with. And just before we came on tonight, I had a look at the consultation responses, and Sefton's flood risk and drainage people say that there's no objection subject to the conditions being imposed that require it to happen in accordance with what's being said. So I think really from the information in the application, I would have thought that the access and traffic is probably a more serious concern, because the existing access is quite unsuitable. They propose to widen it at the bottom and create a lay-by for parents, but you've only got to look that there's parked cars on both sides of the road all the time, and that traffic can't pass in both directions. So I think the traffic issue is probably more, not a showstopper, but more of a hurdle for them than the flood risk issue. I think they can overcome the flood risk issue with a technical solution and the right conditions.
You can build another Panama Canal.
Yeah, exactly.
It was something that Patrick mentioned in the inquiry, that the east side development wasn't assessed in the autumn and winter period, you know, so potentially their assessments could well have been quite wrong, you know, on that east side development, and of course it was seemingly ignored in the inquiry, and I'm just thinking that again, you know, that we could have similar types of assessments on this site, but obviously I appreciate you're not a sort of hydrologist in that regard, but it's just something to think about. I thought really, sort of because our minds are very focused about flooding, of course, in Maghull recently.
Yeah, this site, although it's got Winnie Brook at the bottom, there's no part of it that's actually thought to be at risk of flooding in terms of the Environment Agency. It's flood zone 1, but just there's a blue line at the bottom of the site that denotes Winnie Brook, whereas land east of Maghull has got big patches of blue all over it that say flood zones 2 and 3, risk of flooding, whereas this site seems to be, yes, it's got the brook at the bottom, but it doesn't seem to be at risk of inundation in the same way.
I must admit, I work in the school that sits behind that, and we never have flooding from it. We don't have a problem really with it at all. It does sit low, and it always has sat low. Just thought I'd let you know.
On a sort of lighter note, There is a third use for that particular site at the moment. They've been using it as a film studio for Channel 4, haven't they, for a new film with Jodie Cromer and Stephen Graham. But that's by the by.
Councillor Tom Hughes.
Yeah, I've just been contacted by a resident a few days ago who lives on Fernbank. It's just regarding two issues. His property backs, his back garden backs onto Park Haven, and he was just wondering if the trees that are at the back of his garden, are they protected under the plan? And the second point is, he was just wondering, and a lot of his neighbours were wondering, if there's any meetings happening in the future over this application.
Okay. The first question, there's no trees on the site that have tree protection orders. So none of the trees are specifically protected. But the proposals were quite sympathetic to the trees. I think there's a, just getting the paper, sorry.
Okay.
There's quite a significant tree belt from the front all down the side and at the back. And the plans were to keep the trees as they are.
Right.
So I think it's a mature belt of trees. That is the sort of thing that a responsible developer would work around, rather than go in and get rid of it all. So the plan indicates that the tree belt around the periphery of the site stays.
Right.
They might put a TPO on it.
Yeah, they might do.
They might put a TPO on the site, of course. Often when you get a planning application, you sometimes find that a council will put on a tree preservation order on the trees that are there if they think they have some amenity value. And I know that shelter belt, it does have some amenity value, so they might do that actually.
The second question, will there be any meetings? Well, I think Councillor McKinley said that he'd called it in to planning committee. So the decision will be made publicly as opposed to written off by an officer on a delegated report. So if your residents are interested, they'll be able to listen or participate if they want to.
Right, okay, thank you.
Can I just come back on that? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. What happens, Tom, is because of COVID now, we're not even allowed to do presentations to the planning committee the way we would normally do, to get our kind of, I suppose, emotional side across to the planning committee as well. That's not being allowed. The only thing that's allowed is a written statement from the councillor or whoever is objecting to it, which will be read out by one of the planning officers. Now, we've tried to do something about this. We say there's a democratic deficit there because, you're denying elected representatives the ability to represent their people. But they say it's because of COVID, and Sefton's legal officer has kind of adjudged that this is the way it's going to be. So unless we can overthrow that somehow, what we will do, we will use Philippa. If we agreed this evening to go along with the rejection proposal, we will use Philippa's feedback as the substantive part of our appeal of why this should be rejected. And I'll write something to back that up, or, try and put a little bit more, from the kind of, I suppose, the residents' view on it. As to having meetings, I'm not sure, what purpose that would serve at the moment. You can say that, they can ring us, they can speak to us, and we'll make the representations on their behalf.
Yeah, that's just all. That's not just what they mentioned to me. I don't know if they wanted to sit down, all the residents, discuss what their objections are going to be.
Yeah,
I'll have to clarify that in another email.
What we'll do, Tom, after this evening, if we agree, we'll put the Philippa's report up on the website, and so everybody can have a look at that and say, Maghull Town Council, if we agree, have rejected this on the following grounds, and the residents will be able to look at that. And I would suggest that if they've got other issues as well, they could contact me, and I'll try and include that in my presentation to the planning committee because we have called it in. If we wouldn't have called this in, it would have just been decided by officers. So at least we've raised the profile of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Councillor Ross Ferguson and then myself. Ross, you need to unmute yourself.
How's that?
That's the one, thank you.
Sorry. Just going back to what Patrick said right at the beginning about the traffic. I live approximately 1,000 yards away from where this development's going to be, and I know how chaotic my road is and the road that it leads to, which is Days Lane, during school time. It's absolutely unbelievable. Most of us on this road just don't bother going out round about 3 o'clock because it's just ridiculous. And then to send construction traffic along is ludicrous. Plus, you know, the good fight has been fought about the traffic coming through Maghull. Are we going to be seen as letting another developer run their traffic through Maghull, through the town? So I have real concerns about the traffic issues. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Right. This isn't mine. Tony Carr, Councillor Carr, got in touch with me. So I assume he can't speak for some reason. So this is his message. It says, would the secretary responsible for housing development require exceptional circumstances from LA prior to approval? Does anyone understand that?
I think that would have been. I think that would have been if it had been a greenbelt site. You need special circumstances. Here, I suppose, as Philippa has outlined, the site is not redundant, and therefore, on the face of it, on planning policy, it shouldn't be released for housing. But I suppose the special case might be the sort of thing that Angela mentioned. They've got an aspiration for was it a cardiovascular centre or a special facility, so that might be part of their special argument to say, well, yes, it's not redundant, we've had to keep it going because we can't close it, we've still got to look after people, and the only way for us to do it, we've got no other access to funding, and therefore in order to build the special facility that we need, this is the way to fund it. But I suppose in terms of special case, your special case is strengthened if you've got dual applications running, because without that, who knows what happens to the funding? You know, it's your arguments are slightly weakened, and you have to take people on trust.
What that means, by the way, is that if it was a genuine case where they wanted to create a new facility with the money that they would make here, you would expect there to be an application for the facility that they want and need submitted at the same time as the housing, with a sort of joined up argument that says that will fund that. But as far as we know, there's only the houses. And I expect that there's some argument in the viability assessment that they haven't put online. So we might know more about that once we've seen it, I suppose.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Welcome. Are there any other questions? Councillor Chris Carlson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back to what Tom was saying earlier about the residents' objections, I really do feel for them. I'm in total agreement with the traffic chaos when the schools are letting in and out along that road. I've been on buses along that road that haven't been able to pass. How the bloody hell are going to get wagons up and down there? It's crazy. But the objections, just to share it with Tom and the rest of the group, the reason why we've been successful, not only the efforts of the Lander group, but we use the planning laws against the developers, and that's the only real objections we can make, is by using planning to stop planning, if you like. So they're the only laws that the planners adhere to. So having the residents of, I've seen John say is responding to residents saying, we want this development stopped for the lands up at East of McGull. We can't stop it, but we can get the conditions that we've got. But none of us are planning experts, and you know, the amount of time the other guys must have spent on it. I've spent bloody hours reading them documents and formulating arguments and whatnot. From my profession as an environmental scientist, but it's hard work, and for the residents to just turn around and say we don't want that development, it just won't hold water. It has to be in line with planning applications and planning application law. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor June Burns, and then Councillor John Sayers. You need to unmute yourself, Councillor June Burns.
I had it on mute and on no video because the dog was jumping all over me. So to go back to the previous comment that was made about one application should be going in with the other application, so the care home goes in with the housing. When Parkhaven put in the application for Dover Meadows, this was what the residents argued about then, because they were then saying, we need that money for that land to build this care home. And without that money for the land, we can't build the care home. So they'll probably still use the same reason for not doing the two applications together. I mean, they did build the care home in the end, but Sefton didn't reject Dover Meadows on the fact that the other application hadn't gone in. They accepted it on the grounds of, yeah, we realise you need the money before you need concrete evidence that you're going to get the money through Dover Meadows being built before you can put your application in. So I think that's what we're going to be up against again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, June's just preempted what I was going to say. When we dealt with Dover Meadows, it's very similar, but on obviously a smaller scale. Basically, the Parkhaven came to the planning system and said, look, we're a charity, and unless we're able to sell this land to build a dementia centre, it won't happen. And our whole raising debts was receding because the accommodation we've got is not suitable for the 21st century. But they also managed to sweat the affordable housing element was basically, I'm trying to think of the word, abated, in that the money that they would have spent on affordable housing elsewhere, because they couldn't put it on site, which they can do, they actually used the affordable housing element to give to Parkhaven. So I don't know whether Parkhaven got two bites of the cherry there, whether they got the price for the land, plus they got what would have been the affordable housing element as well. I've a lot of respect for Kim Crow and the staff there. They do a great job. But the one thing I did remind the planning committee is, Parkhaven came as like, we are a charity. Well, Eton School is a charity. If you turn up with your indigent parent to Parkhaven and say, I haven't got a red cent, but will you take my relative in who's got dementia, you'll get short shrift. So it's not all hearts and flowers. They do great work, but at the end of the day, it's not a sort of it's not a charity as we would think of a charity. It's got charitable status.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers.
Are you happy then, councillors, for that letter to go in from Philippa as your, are you happy to object to the development as it is currently stated? And are you happy for that letter to go in as your comments?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, is there anybody against? Abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Chair.
Angela, do you think we could style ourselves as the Venice of the North in future with all these swales and lakes and racing ponds?
Well, it is dangerously close to the lakeside, the lakes development, isn't it? It's, sort of, so we could start bringing it. I noticed when you said attenuation pond, Philippa, I thought, Yes, they did one of those at Dover Meadows and completely blocked the drain, and it had a very, very unfortunate effect around there. So let's hope they do this one slightly better. Let's hope they've learned from their mistakes should it ever get passed. But there we go.
Move on. Site of former Royal British Legion, 326 Liverpool Road, South Maghull.
Okay, we had already submitted comments for this. However, Councillor Sayers asked for it to go back on because some news arrived from Planning Committee. So I'll pass over to Councillor Sayers if you don't mind, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, colleagues. Basically, what's happened here is there was a planning application went in to demolish the British Legion. McCarthy and Stone, who were well-known retirement home specialists, wanted to build a retirement home. Now, on the face of it, it's a bit like Land East and Maghull, where the town council itself didn't really oppose that. The old club is an eyesore. It needs to be developed. It's a brownfield site, but not at any price. As the ward councillor, I represented some of the neighbours, and again, the neighbours were being quite rational and said they didn't oppose it in principle, but where they were concerned was obviously loss of privacy, etc., but also on the design. Now, if you look at the pictures, and the lady who was the spokesperson for the residents did some homework. There's a lot of McCarthy and Stone stuff around the country and locally, which looks really nice. It's sort of, curved roofs, and there's examples in Ormskirk and Crosby. What we were getting was basically what looks like a white Rubik cube. They've also decided to put the balconies facing the canal almost right on top of the canal towpath. They're almost right up against the fence. So the residents are going to be looking at a 4-storey building with Juliet balconies, about 12 of them, staring at them. On top of that, the actual design wasn't very good. Anyway, I told the residents, we were going to struggle. I felt it. I've been to a number of planning committees, and I did feel that we might struggle with this one. However, I was pleasantly surprised that the planning committee immediately took umbrage over the application. There were 2 issues they were concerned about. One was about the issues, again, as was reflected earlier, on viability. Apparently, they come to 3 conclusions about viability and basically just took the middle one. So that obviously affects the amount of Section 106 that's payable. The committee, obviously, a lot of the councillors are fairly long in the tooth on that and understand planning law almost as well as some of the experts. The councillors were not happy with that, but also they were very unhappy with the design. One of the councillors likened it to a multi-storey car park, and indeed that's really what it looks like. So the planning committee then deferred it and sent it back to the developers, one to have another look at the viability, which really I wasn't too concerned at, and show the planning department can sort that out. But the other one was over design, which is the thing that's been bugging the residents and bugging me. So we also put forward an argument as the town council that the character assessment, MAG 4 in the neighbourhood plan, had been breached. Now, it's a moot point as to whether it's been breached or not, but the fact is the planning department accepts that they have breached it. But then they came up with a fairly mediocre response as to why they should allow the breach. And basically, I could sum that up as it's a canal side setting, it's near the town centre, and there's buildings outside of the character area, which is the Park Haven character area, over the Red Line Bridge, which are not the same as the Park Haven character. Well, they're not in the Park Haven area. So the planning officer has admitted they breached MAG 4, which is to our advantage. So what I would ask colleagues is to agree that we, as a town council, contact the developers post haste. It's to come back in the next cycle, but I'm assured it's not coming back on the 17th. So it'll be some time after that. But that this town council comes back and supports the residents in respect to design, quality, and ask McCarthy and Stone to reconsider the height of this thing, and to make it look, you know, if it's good enough for Crosby and it's good enough for Ormskirk, why isn't McGull getting a decent design? Why are we getting this monstrosity? It's the pictures of it are online, and it really is horrible. It's basically a brick cube with cladding, which they assure us is not the same as the Brentford cladding, but it's quite hideous, really. And for that setting, they could have a really nice place, you know. But it's obviously they're trying to squeeze as much accommodation in as possible. Because again, McCarthy and Stone are, you know, some of the residents were arguing about, you know, the way residents do. They have to talk about every issue, and they were saying they thought that the road was steep for the elderly residents, but really what they're building here is, and they'll struggle to get the Mercedes in first gear as they leave. You know, it's not about Zimmer frames. It's over 55s, and it's expensive accommodation for people retiring. Nothing against that, but you know, we need a better design. So that's it basically, Chair, is to ask the council to support the residents. We approach McCarthy and Stone and the planning committee and insist on a better design that's more in characteristic with MAG 4 of the neighbourhood plan, and that they abide by the neighbourhood plan and don't breach it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frank Sharp.
They had an open meeting originally on the I think November-December 2019 at St Andrew's Church, and after we'd been to I think Manchester, Altrincham, Councillor Sayer and Councillor Ken Hughes and myself were all at the opening and to discuss this with the architects, and we all echoed what we'd been told by residents at that time in 2019, that in fact it did look like a car park. And they assured us that we'd make some changes, and it doesn't seem like they have done after all that time, which seems like an awful waste. So I'm simply very supportive of what Councillor Sayers is saying as well on behalf of the residents. They've made a very clear and cogent case, I think, in terms of comparing what other McCarthy Stone buildings actually look like. And you know, it wouldn't be a great effort for them to change it into something more satisfactory. Thank you.
So is that proposal by Councillor Sayers acceptable then to council? Against? Abstentions? That's unanimous then. As I understand it, it's support the residents in terms of the design. I'll compose a letter and send it off.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think it's the lucky Diane Humphreys again, who's the case officer with that one. Can I say that is the
Angela.
Yes.
Angela, could you send it to McCarthy and Stone as well as the planning officer?
Yeah.
You know, it'll speed it up, because they did say the next cycle. She assures me it won't come back on the 17th, but I'm just a little bit concerned, you know, that it goes back and they ignore it. So it might be better if we could get it to them as well as the case officer. And as Frank said, one of the residents succinctly said it. Basically, she said they consulted, but they didn't listen.
Yes, yes, yes. That's fine. That's no worries. That's it for planning. So I think we can let Philippa and Edward go with our grateful thanks. That once again they have been stars of our council meeting with regards to planning, and so we will see them next time.
Thank you
very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Item number 6. Roadmap to reopening. Members are asked to consider the report pages 14 to 22.
Well, people, Boris has spoken.
Hooray!
Come the 21st of June, we'll all be hugging and kissing and, you know, brushing up against each other. It's all there for the taking. In all seriousness, the report is there for you to agree the roadmap for us to reopen. Bearing in mind item 12, which is the rewire of the town hall, I'd love to get that done before we even consider opening, really, not to prejudge a decision you might want to take. With regard to that, I've got the key questions about opening after that. You're okay with the roadmap as it's been highlighted. We've also had a request in from the CCG about whether or not they can continue to have a license to occupy the activities room plus associated accommodation until the 30th of September. They've currently got one until the 30th of April. They want to continue there until the 30th of September, bearing in mind that that has an impact, that if we are a vaccination centre, then really there's a limit to how open we can be to members of the public. I've stunned everybody.
Councillor Chris Carlson and then Councillor June Burns.
Me personally, I think we should grant the CCG the extension that they require. Inoculating people and vaccinating people is the most important thing and contribution we can make at this moment in time. So that would be my viewpoint. Give them the extension and limit public access to the buildings until they vaccinated enough people that we can go back to allowing people into our buildings.
Completely agree with you there, Councillor. Councillor June Burns.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I think a lot of people will be reluctant to get back into activities for a while anyway. So I think having the CCG and getting everybody their COVID vaccinations. Mine unfortunately was cancelled today, but there you go. I've been all excited and then it got cancelled, and Josh can tell you the saga I've had over that one. But yeah, the sooner everybody's vaccinated and we can get back to normality, but I think people will be very reluctant to get back into activities anyway. So I think, yeah, just carry as we are.
Councillor John Sayers.
Yeah, I don't want to be mercenary over this, Angela, but if the roadmap goes according to plan, and weddings and funerals and perhaps, you know, hopefully more christenings and weddings than funerals take place, will the venue still be allowed to be used if it's the vaccination centre? Because I'm just wondering what impact that's then going to have on the town council's income for nearly the next half of the year, the financial year. I know at the moment, I think they were paying us some rent, but basically a peppercorn. And you know, no one would disagree, it's really vital. But I'm just a bit concerned that, you know, the people of the colour ended up subsidising what is
yeah, when we set the budget was set really on an understanding that we probably wouldn't get as much rent in the beginning part of the financial year as we had anticipated for other financial years. So so that was taken into account. Not that we have come to you to say, can you reduce the rent for people, because we're waiting to see what happens with the roadmap and how quickly people get back into it. I have spoken to Tony. There's two slight problems with it. One, the CCG are currently using the venue as admin space, and two, and they need that, and two, he's going to have to take some while to get his bookings back up to what they were previously. So he's not anticipating anything really before, let's go with August, September himself. And two, his lease needs to be sorted out before he gets back in. So I'm sending him proposed heads of terms moving forward this week so that we can go into negotiation with that coming back into it.
Could I suggest though, when you speak to the CCG, that, you know, if we do extend till September, there needs to be some sort of recognition that, you know, if it has started to have a dire impact on our income when everybody else is open and everything's hunky-dory, you know, I don't know whether will they give us extra money. You know, it's a national effort. It's not like we're stealing money off the National Health Service. You know,
there is that. I mean, certainly when I gave them a license to occupy until the 30th of April, there wasn't an expectation that they would have anything that more than had been originally agreed, which was the activities room, the kitchen, and really the disabled toilet. That little corridor that went into the activities room was what was agreed for the rent that was proposed. They've now sort of spread out shall we say, as they've started to do more planning work, more admin work, etc., and they've gone into the venue, partly as a protection for the staff, your staff, as it were, moving forward. Now, with regards to that, I can certainly go back to them and say, yes, council, we're all for, you know, you're staying, but you'll have to cough up a little bit more in rent because you're getting more accommodation.
I mean, effectively, it's like, I mean, the police pay us £11,000 a year for that little police station. I forget how much the NHS are paying per month.
They're paying £1,000 a month
for basically the function room, the venue, and all the bottom parts. So, and the kitchen. So, I think really it wouldn't be unreasonable for us to ask, because effectively, although it's, you know, we're being generous, and I recognise the vaccination is important, but at the end of the day, the people in McGull are then starting to subsidise all the people coming from surrounding areas who are getting vaccinated at the town hall. I don't think that's really right, and I don't think asking for a bit extra would be remiss, to be honest. In fact, I think it's the other way around. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't ask.
What figure were you thinking of?
Well,
do you want me to double it?
I was going to say, yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, if the police are paying £1,000 almost a month for that
one room,
yeah, you know, for what
okay then.
I mean, you could use that as an example and see, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Thoughts?
I've got people with hands up. Earlier, so I've got Councillor Desmond, Councillor Carson, and then Councillor McKinley. So.
Oh, you haven't got me.
Not you, right? Not Councillor Desmond.
Right. Councillor Carson, then. Sorry.
So I was just going to sort of. I think John makes a really good, valid point. The residents of McGull should not be impacted by providing a facility, a vaccination facility that is not just for the residents of McGull, it's for everybody. I think as they're occupying more space, they should pay more money. That's just, we're not overcharging here. We're just charging a fair price for what they're accepting. I was also just had that Sefton Council have also got office space in the Meadows Leisure Centre as well that could be used as a point of emergency. But you know, certainly the NHS, who I love and work for and respect, they have to pay a fair amount of money for the space that they're renting off the students.
To be fair, we are more of a medical centre now than we are a town hall. Sorry, who was next?
Councillor Patrick McKinley.
Oh, yeah.
Angela, I think I'd use the, we did meet with the CCG people and we asked them who's getting vaccinated, and they couldn't really answer it. They said, well, you know, we don't collect that data, it's collected on a, you know, much larger basis by whoever. I think the rationale would be that we need to put the rent up because we understood in the first instance that this would be a vaccination centre for McGull. And what's happened as a result of the expansion is we're getting more and more people probably from different areas. So effectively the people of McGull, because we're losing the income from, it's the opportunity cost of letting the NHS use that. And I think we should, you know, let them use it. It's a valuable service and so on. But I think the reality is now, if they're going to go until September, we need to say, you know, well, I don't know, an extra 500 quid a month for the venue or something, I don't know, but you need to sort that out. But I think the rationale is that in the first instance, our initial enthusiasm was to provide a vaccination centre for McGull, not being xenophobic, but the McGull Town Hall is owned by the people of McGull, and we're offering a service right across Sefton. We need some financial recompense. I'd use that as the rationale.
I agree with Patrick McKinley there, because I've had people coming to me, and my mum, but I've had other people coming to me saying, I live in McGull, why can't I get vaccinated in McGull Town Hall? Because it's not part of the NHS website thing. So I agree with Councillor McKinley there. Sorry to interrupt you. And then after you, Clark, I've got Councillor Burns.
Guys, the only thing I was going to say, I don't think I would have missed for the world Debbie, the finance officer who lives in Newton Le Willows, trying to direct somebody from Crosby to this town hall, not knowing Crosby and not really knowing McGull, it's been priceless. I can have to say, God love her, she's done her best to do it as well, but it's been worth the money alone listening to that. Yes, Councillor Burns.
Can I just say, I was supposed to have my vaccine today, but it's been cancelled. But that was in Edge Hill College, and my second vaccine is going to be at Aintree Racecourse. But I wouldn't dream of saying I shouldn't have to travel here or have to travel here. That's my choice. So I'm a bit reluctant to start saying we should keep McGull for McGull. You know, in Netherton, they've got nowhere that they can go to get the vaccinations, and they're being sent everywhere. You know, people in Old Road are being sent to Broad Green, and my sister who lives in Liverpool got sent to St Helens. Don't stop being like McGull's for McGull. I'm not agreeing with that.
I think that's a fair comment. I think that is a fair comment. But what I'm going to say was, having spoken to the NHS staff that work here, there is naturally only sufficient. They have slight difficulties getting the vaccine, so they don't vaccinate every day, and they also can only do so many people in a block period of time. So really, when you go online and you book, you get the next appointment, which may be Edge Hill, it may be Aintree. I know somebody who lives in Knowsley who's ended up in a pharmacy in Widnes getting the jab, but it's about getting it as quickly as you possibly can. And that's why I think there's been sort of like, well, I would have preferred to go to McGull, but I've had to go to Edge Hill. It's the quickest point of being able to get you in. The size of the room and the amount of staff they've got, they can only do so many. And that's it. And you are providing a facility for South Sefton CCG. The other one that they have is North Park in Bootle. And that's the only two for this CCG. If you go online, of course, you'll be sent all over the place. If you want it quickly, you'll travel. If you're prepared to wait and come to McGull, then that's what will happen.
But everyone's inconvenienced. That's what I'm trying to say. Because like my sister's surgery is the Bootle one. So because that's being used as a vaccination centre, she actually can't be seen by a doctor at that centre. She has to go elsewhere. So we're all inconvenienced, and it doesn't sit well that we start saying McGull should be for McGull.
To be fair to Councillor McKinley, I'll just come back on that and then I'll give it to Councillor Sayers. To be fair to Councillor McKinley, when they came, they did explain it was going to be a facility for McGull residents.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been what's happened. Of course, things move on. Things always move on. But that is what we were told when we first talked about them coming here. That's not how it's worked out. We work with what we've got.
Sorry, Patrick, I've got Councillor Sayers in front of you. You're on mute anyway, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify. Just clarify from what June said. That's not the message, June, that we were sending. Basically, what we're saying is, and what my thoughts were, when they first came to us, they wanted a vaccination centre for McGull. So I think probably we would have let them have the place for nothing if that was the case. But when it's extended to other areas, it's a bit similar to everything that we provide. At the end of the day, it's about the money that the premises are losing, and the people of McGull have got to make up through their precept. So I don't care where people come from to have the jab. That's great. I haven't got a problem with that. People go to St Helens Rugby Club, but you can bet your bottom dollar St Helens Rugby Club are charging for the use of that facility. And I'm not saying that we need to have a king's ransom, but at the end of the day, the whole of the town hall has basically become a medical centre. We can't use it for any other purposes, even if the roadmap opens everything up. And I don't think it's unfair to say that the residents of McGull shouldn't be subsidising what is effectively a regional or even a national facility. That's what I'm saying. I don't care where the people come from. I think, if you can get the jab, it doesn't, get the jab.
Yeah, to come from the moon.
So I wouldn't want people to get the wrong end of the stick, because it's not about saying it's, this is just for local people. We're not saying that. What we're saying is local people shouldn't have to subsidise a national facility.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKinley.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. I don't need anybody to apologise or explain or to be fair to me. I was very clear what I was saying. Very similar to John. I wasn't being xenophobic about it, saying people shouldn't come here to have the job. What I was talking about was people were subsidising the service that's cost Sefton, and there's an impact on the people who are paying the precepts here. That's all I'm saying. It's a facility, it's an asset for the town that is owned by the people of this town. So therefore, if we're losing income and therefore those people are losing income, we need to look at the funding. Nobody's being xenophobic about this at all.
But at the moment, we're getting money from them, and that facility wouldn't have been raising any money. So I think really, we should be grateful for that we're getting money. I just think ask for £500 a month extra because they've extended themselves into another room. But I just think we need to be careful how we ask.
I just remind colleagues as well, it was me who approached them in the first place to come here. So I know all the arguments in and out about how much money it was raising or not.
So are you okay with the roadmap then? And you're okay with me going and asking for more money for the additional accommodation, and you're okay for the CCG to be there until the 30th of September?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you.
Item number 7, Consultation Gambling Act 2005. Members are asked to consider the response to the consultation, pages 23 to 47.
Do you want to put a response into the consultation?
Can I just ask, I'm not going to ask much, is there anything we need to be aware of specifically from the goal? Is it likely to be an issue?
No, what they have to do is every 3 years they have to come out and consult with you about the Gambling Act. There's 4 main provisions within the Gambling Act, and the main one that you'll be quite happy about is the protection of children. So that you can't do various bits and pieces. You can't have a bookies that is open outside a school, etc., etc. All of that sort of thing. It's pretty much standard, but it's there in case anybody had got any receipt of anything from residents, or if you wanted to put in a council's response to the consultation. I think last time this came before you, there was the same enthusiasm and response, shall we say, for putting in a response to the consultation.
Councillor John Sayers.
Yeah, can I move that we trust the Sefton Authority to do the right thing, and basically, I don't think, unless anyone's got a burning suggestion, I'm quite sure the local authority will have a handle on this.
Councillor Tony Carr.
Thanks, Josh. It may be worth just putting something in regarding fixed odd betting terminals. There's very little regulation, or the regulation that is around, and it has impacted Maghull. It was in my ward. It was the 2 betting offices opposite the Meadows pub. There was one opened because it had three fixed odds betting machines in it. It had reached its maximum, so they opened another one next door. Another company put another 3 fixed odds betting, and I think the regulation around fixed odds betting terminals should be stronger within the government. I think that, because otherwise you get an abundance of betting shops on a block of shops, which then leaves very little for retailers to open up, because the bookies have took the whole block effectively, and there's nothing the council can do to say, well, you can't trade as a bookmakers there because there's one next door. But if the fixed odd betting terminal machines were restricted or open in one particular shop, there'd be no necessity to open another one next door to it. So I think the regulation on fixed odd betting terminals needs to be strengthened when the gambling's reviewed anyway.
Is that what you want me to put in then as a response that we need
Just
to
strengthen the regulation regarding fixed outbound terminals within shops, because what we would end up with McGill Square covered with betting shops, and the council would have no weight behind it then.
Okay.
Can I just second what Tony just said then, and we can move on?
Yeah. Is everybody okay with that?
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All agreed.
Lovely. I'll get that sent off.
Thank you. Right. Item number 8. Consultation. Merseyside Association of Local Councils. Members are asked to consider the response to the consultation, pages 48 to 49.
Does anybody have a response to the consultation? Does anybody bothered about Malk? Does anybody want to go?
Well, first question I was going to ask, what would the cost to the council been on it, and is there any benefit?
Well, I don't know about benefits because it's a councillors' organisation for councillors.
Yeah.
And the cost to it is nil because you already pay it with your LALC subscription.
Right, it's not like 10 parishes in Bath where we have to pay.
No. Not that I'm aware of, no. It's the fact that the prime mover of this, unfortunately, died, and the consultation has gone out to see whether or not there is an appetite within the Merseyside Association of Local Councils to continue. Now, without being funny, this council thought it had already died. So, and you haven't sent a representative for, well, I think since 2015. So it's up to you, really. If you want to go back and say, you know, we're not bothered about it.
If I'm honest, I'm happy to go on it, but I need to sort out the logistics of it. Certainly, when it's not meeting virtually.
I can put that in the response that we would have somebody willing to attend, but really, ideally, they would be virtual meetings.
Yeah.
It's not a decision-making body.
Right. Okay. Right.
Then, you know, that would be affected by the LGA or the coronavirus exception legislation, the way that these meetings were. Councillor Sayers indicated.
Yeah, Councillor Sayers.
Just very quickly, this came up at Lydia Parish, and they decided that they would participate and see how it goes. So I think if Jonathan is prepared to do it, I think we should probably likewise, you know, show willing.
Yeah, as I say, if it does go back to face-to-face meetings at some point, I'm happy to do that, but I just need to sort out the logistics of it, obviously, because I did drive at the time, which I didn't, and without borrowing counsel with it, that's given recent events in my health, that's not going to change for the foreseeable.
Is everybody happy with that? Oh, Councillor McKinnon.
Angela, can I just ask, is this the Merseyside equivalent of the Cheshire one that was on the internet where she has no authority? Is it the Merseyside equivalent of that? It
is. Jackie Weaver is the chief executive of the Cheshire Association of Local Councils.
Yeah.
The equivalent is Marion Gelder up at Penwortham as the Lancashire Association of Local Councils, because Merseyside, because, you know, they haven't quite worked out that we split off in 1974, they include Merseyside under the Lancashire side of it. So yes, it is. I'm not entirely sure Marion would have been the same as Jackie Weaver at Handforth Parish Council. But that's essentially what it is. The Association of Local Councils is a councillor-run thing for councillors. So it's all very well me saying, well, you know, it affects me not at all whether you decide to go to it or you don't decide to go to it. It's what you as councillors get out of it.
Councillor June Burns.
So, Angela, what's the purpose? What do they do, or what would we be doing?
It's about getting together and networking in its purest form. It's about discussing issues that affect the Merseyside parishes, but from a councillor point of view, we already do that as clerks. We have our clerks network that discusses various things, but it may be away into Liverpool City region, it may be away. The issue that you've got here is that so many of you are actually dual-hatted councillors, that sometimes that we have a different mechanism by which we can access, shall we say, those of us who have slightly more power and budget about these things. That's what Malc is essentially trying to do. It's about keeping councillors informed about things. It's one of those associations, if I can put it for you like that.
I think
Councillor Chris Carlson.
Can I just suggest we invite somebody from Malc to come along to one of our meetings and give them the first 10 minutes to explain what the benefits are to them, to us. Because I certainly think for the parish councillors to be going through battles with professional developers on sustainable communities and stuff like that, the skills that are needed are far beyond your normal town stroke parish council. And I think maybe some of the experiences that we've gained could be shared and enhanced by other councils. So that's what I would say. Let's see what the benefits are, and to ask one of their representatives to come along and speak to us.
Okay, do you want it at the next council meeting? Do you want it on the 14th of April if we can?
If agreed by the rest of my colleagues, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll agree to that.
Yeah.
All those in favour?
Council right. Okay, lovely.
All I was gonna add, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't make no difference to that vote anyway. But the only thing I was gonna add, because the thing that was frustrating about Sefton Partnership, if I put it like that, was that it didn't really have any connection to the city region, and it kind of went more like in like Southport Formby direction, and we had absolutely other than Aintree, we didn't really have any connection with any of the councils near Liverpool. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Item number 9. Minutes for noting. The minutes of the following committees are attached for noting. Amenities Committee, the 18th of November 2020. Community Services Committee, 4th of November 2020. And Finance and General Purposes Committee, the 9th of September 2020. These are pages 50 to 62. Item number 10, Chair's closing comments. I have no comments, apart from thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening, wonderful week. Item number 11, exclusion of the press of public. That is in accordance with the section of 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public to be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information under paragraph 3 of part of 1 of Schedule 12A and the Act, and it would not on balance be in the public interest to discuss the report. Done.
Is that agreed, please?
Agreed.